So, welcome to the afternoon one. Some housekeeping things. There will be fresh coffee. I was told to use the locution fresh at 4. You will also get treats because we love puppies. And this evening, following the last panel, here there is a reception celebrating Sibjo's 100th, so Gaetano and family will be with us. And we will also present the 9th award for leadership in responsible practice, which is very exciting for us because it has real traction. Tomorrow, we will serve lunch. So just a heads up, the days are not exactly parallel. Also, two other things. One, some of our makers, those whom you met last night, so Alice Ciccolini, Melanie George Koplos, Andrew Lamb, and Megan Brown will be or are here, and also have work with them. And I call this out because really it's our reason for being. So, and it's great work, and you have an opportunity to really look at it. So I wanted to mention that. Okay, so something to say about this afternoon, which is, we this year have 2 ASM panels looking at 2 different geographical regions. That was maybe grammatically not right. And one being the Brazil Basin, the other one being West Africa. Now, the reason I'm calling this out, because obviously you've looked at the program, but is to tell you why. One of the things that is incredibly important, and in this way, ASM is a bit like the arts and crafts movement, which is that space and place and specific instance really contribute to thinking about any given situation. And we have been trying to incorporate increasingly the specific as well as the sort of elements of practice, or whatever one should say. And so this year we decided to have 2 panels on this, and particular guiding lights in this thinking have been Rachel Perks from the World Bank, who is unfortunately not able to join us this year, and also Edward Bickham. And the first time that Edward participated in this conference, we talked about his report on ASM, the intersection of ASM and LSM, which has in it, I am told, because I put the number up too high, but 25 case studies of specific instances. And so, that has, if you will, prodded the thinking. Now, this session is obviously ASM in the Amazon Basin. I will tell you that we have, in some ways, my Taylor Swift, Eric Adam Herrera Lima. He is the head of forensic geology for the Brazilian federal police. They do extraordinary work, and I am ever grateful to Edward for tantalizing me with all of that. We have, is it Irene?
Yes, perfect.
Was that right?
Yes,
okay.
Perfect.
Okay, Irene Mia, Senior Fellow for Latin America and Conflict, Security, and Development at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. In the blue jacket with the cap, Roger Tissot, Executive Director of the Artisanal Gold Council. And we also have Juan Jose Herrera, who is here from London Gold. So this is our panel. What, John? Okay, this is our panel. It is helmed by Edward Bickham. I am gone.
Not too far, I hope. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon and to my panel. We will, as we go through, do a certain amount of comparing and contrasting the situations in West Africa and Latin America in relation to ASGM. To make some sweeping generalizations, in Latin America, one sees a higher level of mechanization, although Africa is catching up, that the interaction with organized crime is more, sorry, you were waving, okay, drowning, not waving. The interaction with organized crime is very noticeable in parts of Latin America because you already have in Peru and Colombia in particular the narco economies. You have some of that in Africa, but to a much more limited extent. And the interaction between drug money and illegal mining and the laundering of profits that go between them is noticeable. Also in Latin America, there is the issue of invasion of the lands of indigenous peoples, the deforestation of the Amazon driven by ASGM is particularly notable. In relation to extreme circumstances, I would highlight southern Venezuela. Of course, things are in flux in Venezuela and have been since the fall of the Maduro, of at least the man himself. But up to that point, the south of Venezuela, which is highly prospective for gold, was effectively being controlled by a mixture of freelancing people from Venezuelan politics and the Venezuelan military, with a variety of Colombian armed groups such as the FARC and the ELN, and even the Mexican drug cartels. You've got a really fascinating collection of bad people. Also of note is the Madre de Dios area of Peru, which is the nearest thing one could think of really to think of hell, really. The whole degree of environmental despoilation going on there in a very uncontrolled way is mind-boggling. And then also bad news, 10 years or so ago, Peru was blazing a trail on formalization of small-scale miners through a system called Reinfo. About 90,000 miners enrolled in that process. Of those 90,000, about 3,000 came out the other end, and an awful lot of people squatted in a sort of semi-legal situation, and a lot of misuse of that framework took place. The new government in Peru is under instructions to replace the Reinfo system, but whether or not that can be done anytime soon remains to be seen. But there are examples of good developments, in particular in Brazil, with important reforms that have been made to the legal system. The federal police, which we'll be hearing more about, really do have a world-leading approach to dealing with issues of illegal mining. And in Ecuador, the central bank is amongst the world leaders in buying responsibly from small-scale miners, and I think we'll hear from Juan Jose in a moment about that too. But to start us off, we're going to listen to Irene Mia of the International Institute for Strategic Studies. She is less promotional than I am, so on her behalf, I'm going to wave her new report at you, which came out about 3 weeks ago, Mapping Risk and Resilience in the Global Illicit Gold Economy. Well worth reading and on the IISS website. So, Irene, would you like to give us your overview of the situation, particularly in Latin America?
Thanks, Edward, and thanks for waving the report. I actually forgot it. It's actually online. It's available online if anyone wants to read it. Is it okay? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that report was actually quite interesting because we tried to create what we call a matrix, a quantitative framework to assess vulnerability and resilience in gold-producing countries. And clearly the Amazonian country were a big part of the report. In general, I would say that really when you look at the Amazon, I think it's really a convergence of many risks, right? So you have a normal, a kind of very important tension between the fact that the region is very vulnerable to climate risk. At the same time, you have a lot of resources, as we have heard, so there is actually a tension there because clearly, which is something that has been present in Brazilian history for forever, right, between development and conservation. But then also you have the geographical remoteness of the region, the fact that really there is very little state presence, porous borders, very, very low capacity of enforcement, which is something that it's really perfect for creating a perfect environment for organized crime and other type of crimes. And also, I think what we've seen increasingly in the Amazon, but in Latin America, is a trend we see very much across the region, and especially in the gold, in the illicit gold space. It's really what we call the criminal convergence, right? Many analysts calls it for Latin America, also other region, what they call the narco-ecology, which is this convergence between drug trafficking and environmental crime. And I think the illicit gold is really one of the prime example of this convergence. So you really see in the illicit gold ecosystem and cluster, I would say a perfect cluster, negative clusters in the sense that you have really different criminal economies converging and reinforcing each other. So you have obviously the gold mining, but also you have the human trafficking, you have the extortion, you can actually extort miners there. You can also use obviously the gold for money laundering, which is the perfect conduit for that, money laundering and also armed trafficking. You use it also for, and also the broader ecosystem of the site, of the mine site. Many times those kind of artisanal sites, you really have a lot of organized crime groups that are involved in really providing all the services there. If we take the case of the Amazon, of the Brazilian Amazon, we have done a bit of research there a couple of months ago. What you see, it's really the fact that particularly the very powerful Brazilian organized crime groups, the Comando Vermelho and the PCC, they have become increasingly, in a way, really entrenched into the economy of some of those sites. In particular, the Comando Vermelho has a longer kind of history of involvement in the region. But the PCC has been dramatically expanding its presence and footprint towards the north, in the Roraima state in particular. And that is not necessarily being part of them, being really involved in extraction. It's more being involved in all the supply chain around the illicit gold, right? So the PCC is infamous for controlling logistics and transport and fuel also in Sao Paulo and its homeland. But it has, in a way, outsourced the same model in the Amazon. So when you actually control the fuel in the Amazon, it's very important you control everything because you really need air transport and airplanes and fuel to be able to move stuff around. So the PCC, what we see, it's really more about controlling those kind of very key supply chain, which actually enable the gold economy. Also, mercury trafficking. There are a lot of artists, a lot of analysts with which we were talking. They were saying that PCC is also involved in the mercury trafficking. And the mercury trafficking is something that it is another source of revenue for those groups, but it's also a big concern because, of course, there is also a security risk more on the human security side. So even if, and again, I think the last thing I would say with respect to the general risk around illicit mining is really the fact that even if a country is really, for instance, in the case of mercury, banning mercury import or being part of the Minamata Convention, it doesn't really is not enough if there is other countries, neighboring countries, which have different regulation. And what you see in general for the mercury, but for many other things, is there is kind of I would say regulatory arbitrage whereby groups can move wherever it's easier, right? Because there is unfortunately the coordination across the region, the Amazon is not as it should be across the different countries. So we conclude with that.
Thank you very much indeed. Eric, can I turn to you next? I mentioned that Brazil has been an exemplar in the last 2-3 years in terms of activity to try and improve the situation in the ASGM sector. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, firstly, I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Edward, Lisa. That's really supreme to be here to discuss with high-level panelists. And I mean, that's a big challenge you have in our hands in Brazil now. I present myself firstly. I'm the head of geology and gemology forensic sector at Federal Police in Brazil. We are 44 geologists, gemologists, and 4 mine engineers. You're working maybe 85% of the time with gold, but you're working with gemstones also, tourmalines, diamonds. I mean, that's really interesting by my side to be here, to seeing really good panelists to bring off these topics, not just with the gold. Actually, about the gold, we're facing since 2019 a really big challenge during the pandemic period. You have noticed the raise of the price of the gold in the international market. And as mentioned by Irene, you can see off this point in the Amazon, illegal mine sites, and you have a lot of strips. These aircrafts, small aircrafts, usually are landing. They are so impressive. They can open these airstrips in 24 hours. We have different ongoing projects now. One of these projects is a satellite imaging system called PlanetScope. That's a US company. And they have daily alerts of illegal mine and this type of stuff. But I mean, as you've seen, that's a lot of illegal mine sites. And you have a very limited resource to facing this problem in Brazil. And now we are facing the PCC, the First Command of Capital. That's a big criminal organization group. Red Command, CV, Comando Vermelho. You have facing until 2019, 2018, there were really artisanal miners. You didn't face rifles and have guns, this type of stuff at illegal mine sites. But since 2022, 2023, you have faced a lot of heavy criminal groups working. They're not just working with supply chain, selling oil and this type of thing. Now they're operating inside the illegal mine sites. We did some operations to take out these guys from these illegal mine sites, as the Yanomami indigenous territory. That's larger than Portugal. It's good to mention. And I mean, that's really tricky to access this type of site. You need helicopters. The flight hour of the helicopter costs around $8,000. And you need all of this support to be successful against these guys. And I have a good example of a Yanomami. That's one of the points of Irene bring here. 2021 was around 25,000 illegal miners there. After our liberation operation, we took out like 99% of these illegal miners. But I mean, they moved. They still doing illegal mine, not just in Brazil, but now in Guyana, Suriname. And to be successful in this initiative, you need to be here if you're the final market. And I mean, that's so tricky to us as Brazilians to face into disrupting these criminal groups. But I mean, you have to find a buyer market. And in my opinion, you have the DOD Act during this period of economic crisis that you have here in the US. And I mean, if you're gonna have more restrictive law to these big companies who is buying gold, that's a real market. That's necessary to have mine gold. But I mean, this control is necessary. The certification of source of the gold, that's the another point you're doing in Brazil now is the Clean Gold Program. You're sampling gold at different sites. That's more forensic certification. That's not an industrial certification. You're taking samples from Yanomami indigenous territory, for example. And with this signature, geological signature, we can differ the legal from the illegal. And you have some results at this stage. We receive a big grant from Amazon from Brazil, around $7 million, to buy equipment, different equipment, facilities, to improve our capabilities. And I mean, that's a big challenge. It's good to have Ecuadorian colleagues here, Colombian, and you need to be here, discuss the better strategies to facing this problem. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Eric. Could you tell us a bit about your gold fingerprinting technology and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. Should be noted that's not our creation of federal policy in Brazil. That's a different works, previous works by French Geological Survey, from Switzerland companies. But I mean, you're bringing off this knowledge of equipment and the samples. You have samples now that's so hard to find. And it was good because you have AI tool, AI panel early, and now you're working with these LLM models to understand about the capabilities, the geochemistry of the gold. Now you're working for around 2,000, we have 2,000 samples from different districts in Brazil. We signed a cooperation agreement with IBRAM, that's Brazilian Mine, Industrial Mine Associative Companies. We did sampling campaign at Kinross, another companies, Equinox in Brazil, and you're receiving these gold samples as a donation, and you're using this as a fingerprint of the gold. And you could compare, that's so technical, but you could extract some as a top signature, as the mercury, the lead. We are doing also this with universities. Now we are carrying out a new project through Global Initiative, JI Talk, that's a big NGO. They're supporting us to carry out this project of AI traceability. And with a Brazilian University of Brasilia and the Harvard University, we are doing this new work to trace the source of the illegal gold in Brazil. And we signed a cooperation agreement with Colombia, National Police of Colombia. and also with French government, just to carry out this overseas capability of the gold signature. Thank you.
And would you like to say a quick word also, because I do think this should be shared, about the center you've established in Manaus?
Yeah. It's good to see about the CCPI. That's a type of fusion center. You have the city of Manaus, that's the largest city in the Amazon in Brazil. And why Manaus? Because you got straight flights from Manaus to Colombia, to Peru, to of these Amazonian countries. It's tricky to see, but it's the middle of so small is Manaus. It's the middle of the jungle. I don't have a laser to point, but yeah.
The middle of the map.
The middle of the map is the center, the heart of the Amazon. Now you have 9 countries. They are being part of just environmental operations of Brazilian federal policy. And you're doing a type of weekly operations. Gold is the main subject today. We had another operation last month at Madeiras River. It's the same river you came from another city, Porto Velho. That's a river coming from Madre de Dios. That's a big illegal mine site in the world, in the Peru. It's the same river. The Madeiras River is the Madre de Dios River. And that's a lot of illegal miners, dredgers there. We destroy around 200 illegal mine dredges there. And I mean, it's so impressive, the structure of these miners, illegal miners. We destroy another month, they come back, and one dredge costs around $500,000. And that's so organized groups, they have money to recover, they have assets, and now the federal policy is just not looking to destroy these heavy machineries. You're looking for disrupting these financial assets. We had a lot of cooperation with international authorities, and they're trying to freeze these assets of these criminal organizations, not just to even to destroy the facilities, but also to recover the money from the Brazilian government.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Juan Jose Herrera from Lundin Gold. Would you mind telling us a bit about the situation in Ecuador? Because if I think back 5 years or so, Ecuador was one of the relatively peaceful countries in Latin America, and you've been through some very testing times in the meter.
Yes, sure. First of all, thanks for the invitation, Lisa, Edward. For me, it's a pleasure to be here. I think sharing some experiences or information about Ecuador will clearly, show how strong the link is between criminal groups, criminal activities, and illegal mining, and the consequences that have for a country such as Ecuador, but also for businesses such as for mining companies, and also how we as Lundin Gold are seeing an alternative or possibly a mitigation in coexistence and formalization of miners. So first of all, a little bit of context of the mining industry in Ecuador, which is quite unique. Ecuador in the region is not a large-scale mining country. Currently, Ecuador only has 2 large-scale mines, one copper, one gold, which is Fruta del Norte, operated by Lundin Gold. We are quite a big operation. We are talking about 500,000 ounces of gold per year. We are underground mine in production since 2020. And I should say, because it's important for the context, that we have a growth strategy, an exploration strategy, focus on exploration, regional exploration in Ecuador, in the Amazon. Only with these 2 mines, mining is the 3rd largest product of export of countries, so it has changed the economy. If we think this as a pie chart, 1/3 of the pie is Fruta del Norte, 1/3 is the other mine, Mirador, copper project from a Chinese company, and the other 1/3 is, let's call it a formal small-scale mining. There's important mining pipeline of companies, gold, copper companies in early exploration, advanced exploration, and even some others in construction. So we will see how mining increases, large-scale mining increases in Ecuador. There's also anti-mining movements, anti-mining groups. Some indigenous groups are anti-mining in Ecuador. And I also should say there are the institutions in charge of mining are very weak, which Irene just said. Regarding to the province, Zamora Chinchipe, the province in which we operate, and this is quite unique and this is important to understand our formalization strategy. Zamora Chinchipe is a traditional mining province, which is, I would say, quite unique in Ecuador. So if you talk to our workers, to our drivers, local drivers, they will tell you stories on how their great-great-grandparents used to mine with a plateau, right? So artisanal mining. This is an ancestral province focused on artisanal mining, so it's part of their culture. Lately, of course, with gold prices, they have turned into small scale and some others medium scale miners. So there's this strong history around mining, right? In the Amazon region, it's important to put some context here. Most of the mining is the small scale, the illegal mining, informal mining is alluvial, so it's in the rivers, it's located in the rivers, which makes it even more difficult to approach because they just move. And if you have been in the Amazon, there are hundreds or thousands of rivers, small rivers, in really remote areas. So it's a very difficult challenge. Now talking about Ecuador, as Edward said, we used to be a pretty safe country. Now Ecuador is one of the most violent countries of the world. So the situation dramatically has changed during the last 5 to 8 years. What is one of the main reasons is, you know, if you understand the region, Ecuador is between Colombia and Peru, and most of the drugs that are produced in Colombia and Peru, which are big countries, also big producers, are exported through Ecuador. Why? Because weak institutions, corruption, etc. But those drugs are exported through Ecuador, which is huge. That has created an environment in which criminal groups, OCGs, are fighting against territory, first at the ports in the coast region, and now through all over the country. These gangs, these OCGs are or have partnerships with OCGs from Mexico, drug cartels from Mexico, for example. So this is very important. Now, what has changed in the last years is the tide or the link between illegal mining and these OCGs and these drug cartels. Gold prices has increased this exponentially, and you know, we have seen how at the beginning illegal mining was like a money laundry mechanism, a mechanism for them to launder some money. Now is part, at least in Ecuador, is a core of their business. Even they use mining to finance drugs. So it has become a more, even in some cases, a more profitable activity, illegal mining, gold illegal mining, than selling drugs. There's a lot of corruption, so it's very easy to get export certificates. So at the end of the day, this drug is legally exported. You cannot do that with cocaine, for example. So it is, and with these gold prices, it has become really, really profitable. What is behind this? Extortion, as Irene said. There's a lot of other issues such as prostitution, modern slavery, migration, a lot of contamination and pollution, which is concerning. In Ecuador, we have illegal mining in the Amazon region, in the rivers, but also in what we call the Sierra. The highlands is more underground. And at the coast, we also have illegal mining, but also processing plants, which is also hard to approach. What is happening now? The OCGs are fighting for territory, even with international groups from Colombia at the north and from Peru. You know, in Colombia, we have the Las FARC, which is a guerrilla, but also Disidentes de las FARC, and at the south, we have Trujillanos. So this fight for territory, for drugs, but also now for mining, is what has increased the violence in Ecuador. So what has been the government response, and that drives me also to some discussions in the morning about human rights. a total war. You know, they call it a total war, a strong offensive using military for this. There's a lot of US support lately with this Shield of Americas because, of course, illegal mining and drug are related activities. And, you know, bombing, using war machinery to bomb illegal mining, etc. Illegal miners have been declared as military targets and terrorist groups, which, again, we go to the voluntary principles discussion again, and how difficult is the situation for a country. I can elaborate more afterwards, Edward, on what's our strategy, but I really wanted to give this context because this has become one material topic for the security of Ecuador, and of course for any company, not only mining, but any company that operates in this country.
Thanks very much indeed. Juan Jose, could you tell us a bit about Lundin's approach to formalization and working with small-scale miners?
Of course, and I go back to the context I just shared about Zamora Chinchipe, which is very different, and I really need to emphasize that because this is a mining province. It's a mining and agricultural province, so this is part of their history. So when you think, for example, about sustainability and what is a priority, what is a priority for them, you can think of agriculture, but also you can think of mining. Taking aside the illegal mining discussion, they are miners, so this is part of their livelihoods. So what's our role as a company there? That's the question that we ask ourselves. This, as I shared, is a material risk for the company. This can jeopardize our business in Ecuador. We are a one-asset company. We're a big company, but only one producing asset. Everything focused on Ecuador, so it's a big risk. From a security perspective, I already shared information about that. Environmental is a very important piece here, but, and that's more on my side, I will emphasize the social problem that this entails. We have registered during the last months, and I would say year, protests from traditional miners because of this response from the government on bombing all of the miners, right? So we see some conflict coming because local miners are protesting towards the government, but of course towards what they call the multinational companies, right? The government has created frameworks to protect mining from drug cartels and illegal mining, and of course local miners sees the multinational company as one of the bad actors there. So this can escalate to a social problem. As I said, with these gold prices, they are eager to do more mining. So and I put some pictures of our agricultural programs, that is a priority, of course, but now everyone wants to be a miner. So what's the role of a company on that context is what we are asking ourselves. And again, this is key for exploration. We want to grow in Ecuador. We have a very big land package of 60,000 hectares. So wherever we go, there are miners. So if we want to unlock from a social perspective those sectors and for our geology team to explore, we need to coexist with them. And that has been the conclusion from the team. They are the landowners. Indigenous groups want to be miners, so how we can coexist with them. What is our formalization strategy so far? We had a formalization strategy with artisanal miners because of the context of the province. That is not working anymore because no one wants to be artisanal with a plateau. That has changed, of course, with these gold prices, so we need to change and adapt. This is an initial stage, but we want to test if it is successful. And what will be the trickiest part here is to separate who are the criminal miners, I call them, versus the informal miners, which are local, but they are not under the law. So how we can separate that is a very big challenge. We have done many diagnoses during the last months, deep national and local analysis on security, ASM, human rights and security, and etc. We also did benchmark with countries like neighbor countries, with Peru, Colombia, Guyana, and others in Central America too. There are interesting cases of formalization. And we also mapped who the stakeholders could be in this endeavor. So for example, Central Bank, as Edward called, they are really good stakeholder for the commercialization of gold. They buy the gold, and they are very strong at that. So we mapped all the UN agencies, etc., that are around this. We have defined areas in which formalization could be a possibility. This is very important. And now, which is the very big part here, is we are in the middle of the legal analysis to make it work. We need to work with the government, and I included some pictures about that, because for this to be legal, needs to have legal frameworks that allow it, right? So there are some really interesting, cases in Colombia, in Peru, and in other places in which they have legal frameworks towards formalization. We are learning from that. We are thinking on the incentives that they can have to formalize. It will be within our concessions. We want to sign contracts with them with clear rules. This is not part of our core business, so we don't want to have profits from here. So how we can finance their formalization, how we can give them permanent technical assistance, tracking, training, capacity building, etc., and also strengthen their capacities and our capacities of due diligence and compliance. TBD, processing and commercialization. I would say processing is the big part here because process plants are a mess. A commercialization central bank could be a big ally, and we are mapping other allies such as central bank here. So just to close, Edward, I always think of a stick and carrots here, right? And the government has a very, very long stick here and is pushing them to the edge. So how we, as a company, with the government can give them some carrots, coexist. Again, I emphasize they are the landowners here. They are the landowners. They have been doing this for centuries. So how we, as a company, can have a role and coexist with them is what we are in the middle of now. So that's from my side.
Thank you very much. I should have cut you off, but it was so interesting. I didn't. Roger, can you tell us a bit about the situation in Colombia and also about the work of the Artisanal Gold Council?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the invitation. It's really, really interesting to hear all diverse aspects of this very complex industry. Before I start, I would like to briefly mention who the Artisanal Gold Council is and where do we fit in this very complex sector. We are a non-profit organization based or headquartered in Canada. We have been around for 18 years approximately. I took over the organization 3 years ago. I didn't come from the industry, so whatever wisdom I have to say I came from all my colleagues, especially those who are at the countryside. Most of my skill is trying to manage and organize the structure of the organization. When I look at the organization, and I share that because that's going to help with the answer, we were a traditional non-profit based in Canada, run by a group of very well-intentioned, smart Canadians and people from other countries who try to bring their knowledge and expertise around the world. And it was that challenging. And I realized that the artisanal gold mining is what I call local activity. You cannot spare wisdom, travel from Victoria, Canada for 2 weeks in Guyana or the Amazon River and do the capacity building and training and come back and expect that everything is going to be fine. We need to be there, we need to be local. And so what I did is a completely decentralized organization. So we are basically running in the countries where we operate by local teams. And our local teams are the ones who actually share the wisdom. I'm just here mostly with all you good folk to talk about past those comments. In terms of of Colombia, it's a country where we have some operations. We continue to maintain a presence there because we have a strong presence in Medellin, where with some of the manufacturing equipment, etc. It is extremely challenging, this sector, and everything that was presented by Juan Jose and by our colleague from Brazil is exactly happening in Colombia at a much higher level. The intersection of security, drug money and artisanal gold is there, is real, and it makes very, very difficult to address. For that, obviously governments move from one extreme to another, and Colombia is not the exception. I have seen that in other countries, where from one side say, okay, well, the artisanal gold mining could be this optimistic view, which I'm not saying it's not real, but it was an optimistic view that it percolated initially in the 1980s by the World Bank, where these guys are actually entrepreneurs. You know, if we could just guide them, formalize them, they're going to be entrepreneurs, and they're going to contribute to the value added. To the other one who are criminals beyond any hope, and they are destroying the environment and all those things. So between those two extremes, we have seen position where we provide a lot of funding and support to transform these people into real entrepreneurs, and position where we're going to repress them so they don't harm the environment or the communities that are not involved in that. And from one, we seem to move from this pendulum. I would say in the last few years, Colombia was in this pendulum in a very clumsy way, trying to formalize in a very inefficient way and without really putting any discipline or order in the process. So I don't think too much was achieved. Now the people have spoken, and it seems to me that we're moving to a much more security-oriented government. And I fear, in a way, that we're going to move this pendulum to the other side. My wish is that hopefully some calm would prevail, and instead of sending helicopters to bomb every artisanal mine operation, just try to engage with them and make sure that there is a strong presence of security, but also a process in which, as you mentioned, Juan Jose, formalization is taken care. I hope we can do that, and I hope we can engage with the upcoming authorities. I'm going to finish with that, something that Juan Jose talked a lot about, the formalization process. What I invite is the mining companies like Lundin and others is to think about the work that we do as a non-profit organization, because we are there. The difference is we don't represent the big business. Sometimes when you represent, and having been in both sides, when you represent the big business, there is sometimes a cost or a credibility gap. We are there, we work with the community. We are there because, like I say, Artisanal Gold Council, at least in the last 3 years, what we're trying to do is to build sustainable, viable community. May or may not produce gold, but that's our objective. And that's why we're trying to go to the areas that are less attractive, which have the higher level of security issues. And that's why, in addition to Colombia, we have made our objective to work more on the Sahel.
And we'll hear more about the Sahel. Roger will be a link between the two. Are there any questions? If not immediately, then I will ask one last question to my panelists. Irene, the report you produced has a number of recommendations in it about how the international community can support and reform, and because we've heard a lot of challenging things, but we also need to look at the positive things that are happening.
Indeed, I mean, it is a huge challenge, of course. There are so many different levels of challenges, I guess. I think one of the things that is particularly relevant when it comes to addressing illicit gold, it's this kind of lack of coordination or cooperation between different agencies within the spectrum of actors involved in the illicit gold. We have seen it across the different countries. Brazil is a specific case also because obviously it's a big country, it's federal, so you have not just the lack of coordination at the federal level, but you also have to coordinate with the state level or with the local level, right? So there is all this. I think that's a big piece. And I think there is a lot, and then of course the international level, because once you are coordinated internally, you need then to coordinate with the other part of the supply chain. So I think what we've seen is that it's very important, the interagency cooperation, and how do you do that? So there are a number of good examples. I think what you were mentioning also, Eric, on the case of the Yanomami health crisis. One of the things we've seen in Brazil, for instance, you have this Casa do Governo Yanomami, yes, which is a structure forum for cooperation among different agencies. Obviously, it's very hard. It is, I think it's the only one so far in Brazil, right?
There's another one now.
There's another one. Yeah, one in Mato Grosso. So but it's something that I think is very important. And also I think in Brazil there are other examples like the ENCLA, which is this other thing against money laundering and corruption. So I think for us it's very important. The first thing I would say is really the interagency cooperation. Then of course there are a lot of other different recommendation we had. I think the other, obviously on the formalization, which is a big part of the piece, a big part of the solution. What we have seen, especially in Latin America, as you were mentioning, Edward, it's really this criminal element is quite present in all the informal part. So I think the problem also for Brazil, we heard a lot about talking about cooperatives, which is one of the way in which you could potentially facilitate also what you were saying, Juan Jose, really creating incentive, but also giving the tool to these miners which are actually don't have access to credit, don't have access to financial services, and also land tenure. So of course, in some form, it's hard to formalize if you don't have access to all these things. But it's also true that cooperatives or other type of formalization, if they're done in a way that is not effective, it's actually, they are also very much prone to be captured by criminal groups again. And we have seen that also in Peru, for instance, there's been a program to formalize, which have been. So I think the challenge there is to find the right way to formalize, to create the right, as you were saying, mix of stick and carrots, but also really, in a way, proofing them against infiltration from criminal group, which I think is a big problem in Latin America in most sectors, formal, informal, gold, and other sectors. And I think there are obviously the traceability is a big point, is a very important issues. I think the Oro Alvo, your program, Eric, is one of the best example, and I think, of course, it's important. I think the other thing is really the resources. I think in many cases, what we have seen, I mean, even in Brazil, I think we were having this conversation actually a couple of years ago at an event we did on this report with Edward as well in London. One person was saying, it's lots of countries don't have actually satellite way to actually monitor what is happening. In Brazil, actually, there is. You actually can actually monitor. You have the means to monitor whatever is happening where there is a new illicit mining. But I think the problem is in the case of Brazil, it's really that then what do you do with that? How do you actually enforce? So I think it's a combination of obviously having the capability the technology to do so, but also the enforcement, the training for the people actually having to deal with those issues. I think it's a lot. I would say at the end of this research we have done, there is a lot to be pessimistic about, but there's also a lot of best practices, which I think is also important to share. And those kind of forums are actually ideal in this sense. But likewise, also more structured forum whereby maybe using organizations which already exist or regional organization. I think that's and what we heard today from the different colleagues. It's really the Amazon. Of course, Brazil is 60% of the Amazon, but then again, there seems to be many times a disconnection with how the different countries are dealing with the same problem in a way. And the thing I would say is that organized crime are actually much more connected and transnational than many times the action from the good guys, right? So it's hard to do that if we're not also coordinated on the formal side.
Thank you for that overview. Have we got time for one question, Lisa? One question. We've been allowed a special dispensation.
So my question is for you, Eric, on the end. When you are looking at the isotope signature of the gold samples, what form of gold are you looking at? And does that isotope change through the refining process? Does that ever reach a point where you can no longer test it?
Yeah, sorry, what's your name?
Oh, I'm Danny.
Okay. Nice to meet you. Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, now you're doing a new project to trace the gold through the refinery process. That's a good point. You're looking for mercury isotopes and lead isotopes. Cyanidation can extract these signatures of the lead. And I mean, our main problem now is with mercury amalgamation of gold. And you have noticed some trace elements, zinc, copper, bismuth, they still this process of refinery. But it's more tricky if you're gonna looking for cyanidation. You can extract these ultra trace elements sometimes, and that's I don't have the answer now. You're doing some research papers with universities. Hopefully next year I have this paper. Could I share with you? But I mean, with gold, we publish a paper from this gold from Yanomami indigenous territory. We can share with you also. That's a public document. We did some mixture of gold and some refinery process, and still the bismuth as a tracer. That's a lot of challenges, these techniques. You need really high-end equipments. And now you're looking to this type of AI tools to interpret this data. But I mean, that's a lot of science behind of this proposal idea. But I could share with you of this published data and this future work. Thank you.
I hope you'll forgive me if I put in a quick word about some work that the World Gold Council is doing, which is to try and improve the operation of the infrastructure for the gold ASGM supply chain. One of the problems is the extensive use of mercury. Mercury is not only an abomination when it comes to environmental pollution and human health, it also happens to be very inefficient with certainly hard rock deposits. Therefore, if you can improve the infrastructure for processing, you can, by proper controlled industrial use of cyanide, you can more than double the gold recovery rate from more or less 35 to 40% to more or less 90%, depending on the geology. If you can do that and you can combine it with something much less sophisticated than what Eric was talking about in terms of traceability, but being able to ensure that the material going into processing plant is coming from the places where there's a legal right to mine them, where they've been registered, and where the ore is claiming to come from. There's a XRF-based technology which can tell within sort of a kilometre which small-scale mines the material is coming from, which could, if implemented, provide an interesting basis for improving due diligence. I hope you'll forgive my...
Sorry, I forgot to mention, she asked about the type of the gold. You're doing the sponge gold, usually this type of product of the burning magma. Gold gran, alluvial gold gran, gold nuggets, doré bars. That's a bunch of different types of gold.
So we're going to talk about our technologies in the coffee break. In the meantime, thank you for your questions and your attention, and we'll now turn our attention to West Africa. Thank you. Thank you.
¿Dónde estás? ¿En Quito? Nos tenemos que ir.
¿No hay interés en hacer accesibilidad?
Nosotros hacemos eso, ¿no? Es decir, lo que apenas no hace es inventar cosas. El programa de facilidad que seguimos es el que se plantea con planes de Craftcon. Lo sabemos, lo hemos implementado en varios países, lo hemos adaptado.